Tonight, we look back at the week that was, and what a week it truly was, as we slow the noise down and ask what it all means. This week, a question that's impossible to ignore. If a retired Major General of the Nigerian Army can be abducted and die in captivity, who exactly is safe? Some of Nigeria's most senior retired military officers are sounding the alarm, calling for a complete rethink of strategy. So what must change before more communities and more high-profile Nigerians become victims? It was a week that Nigeria's democracy showed us several faces at once, starting with the loyalty, the NDC, making its members swear an anti-defection oath. Is it a guardrail to protect mandates, or are they criminalizing political conscience? When does party discipline become political bondage? Then, inside the Senate chamber, Senators Adams Oshimole and Ireti Kingibe appear to be on the same page about one thing. Something doesn't add up in the document that suspended Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, with Senator Kingibe's signature showing up on the suspension paper, despite her insistence that she never signed it. Who can trust the paperwork in what is supposed to be Nigeria's most democratic institution? From Abuja to London, we turn to justice. Former Petroleum Minister Diezani Alison Madueke was found not guilty in the UK. Relief for her, yes. But what does the verdict say about Nigeria's decade-long pursuit and about the distance between the courtroom and public perception? Closer to home, the FCT minister, Nyesom Wike, gifted houses to judges in Abuja. A gesture of welfare or a constitutional red flag? When the executive builds homes for the judiciary, are we strengthening independence or testing it? And as all eyes turn to Ekiti State this weekend, another election, another test for INEC. Are they ready this time? Or are we about to replay the same script of logistics, late materials, and disputed results? 6 stories, one question running through all of them. Are Nigeria's institutions bending under pressure, or are they finally being tested enough to grow stronger? I'll be joined by 4 of the sharpest analysts as we get into the week that was. I'm Charles Enyegolu, and this is Arise Prime Time. So we step back from the noise to go beyond the headlines and interrogate the deeper implications of all these events as we take a hard look at the week that was. A week where the loudest stories did not arrive with answers, they arrived with questions. Tonight we have informed assessments by our guest commentators, and they are the director of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Dr. Sam Amadi, who is also a professor of law, the international multimedia journalist and former BBC correspondent Donu Kabara, who will be with us imminently, and the policy strategist and group CEO of the global investment and trade company Baba Yusuf. All 3 are with me in the studio here in Abuja, and from our studios in Lagos, I'm also joined by the public policy analyst and political communication strategist Kenny Okolubo. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. I'll keep the lady in abeyance until she actually arrives. But let's start with you, Dr. Sam Amadi. A retired Major General is kidnapped and dies in captivity. Is this simply another tragic incident, or does it mark a psychological turning point in Nigeria's security crisis?
Well, in a sense, cynically, you can say just another, because this is not the first. And we've seen, of course, serving general killed, was dramatic, with plea on video, pleading for his life, and got killed, beheaded by a terrorist. And we've seen now a retired general. And we've seen several, serving and retired officers becoming victims of this terror attack. But the critical thing is that, look, it takes too long. In none of these cases, the Nigerian government could not, the Nigerian military, with all the sophistication we have and all the investment we've got in terms of arms and in terms of morale, couldn't rescue this general. And again, when he died, the video showed the body being handed over. Terrorists could be daring to hand over the body, and of course, finally we got the wife. So basically, the point is not that there's a terror attack. I mean, states are now victim, or being confronted by non-state criminal actors. But what happens is the real measure is how the state responds. Can they prevent? Can they take out these guys? Can they rescue generals or civilians who are in captivity? In the Nigerian case, we never did get it done. So the psychological trauma is that this is a weak state that not just confronted by terrorists, but can't even retrieve a general in captivity. That's damning. It shows that the citizens themselves are in for worse than this.
Baba Yusuf, I wonder what you think, because we just heard retired generals holding a news conference 24 hours ago, now openly demanding a complete rethink of strategy. Clearly, they believe, as do many Nigerians, that there's something that's broken in the current approach.
Absolutely, and it is a poignant reflection of our reality, Charles. You know, the military and the doctrine is I believe, is a very difficult, thing for the retired generals to do. But I am also sending a shout out to them, because real generals should not sit on their hands while their compatriots are being killed day in, day out. The combatant soldiers, the citizens of this country. I was just looking at the timeline before we started. From November last year to date, 4 generals. 2 were killed. General O'Brien was a brigade commander, killed with 17 other soldiers. General Uba, Brigadier General Uba, was killed, like Dr. Amadi mentioned. And then we have, just of recent, retired General Raga Abubakar, who died in custody of this known bandit, by the way, very much underlined. We know his location, we know his name. And of course, General Maharaj Iga also was kidnapped last year, albeit he was rescued. Now, that is not discountenancing in any way rugged combatant soldiers, Charles, from general rank and file, colonels, captains, the most best assets we have, are being killed day in, day out. And I'm happy today these generals are saying what some of us have been saying. I've been vocal about it. I've written, I've offered solutions to this country, that when we sound like a broken record about security architecture, Charles, the strategy is the issue, because the strategy should be the one that will produce the security architecture. So if we have an issue with the strategy, people should be bold enough to go back and look at it. Reviewing your strategy should be periodic, within a year, half yearly, for you to be sure that you are moving in the right direction. Now that the generals have started speaking, it is also a warning to everybody that nobody is safe.
Right, thank you for that. And let me just say that Donu Kubara has arrived. She's with us, and as soon as we get a moment, we'll put a microphone on her and have the access to her words of analysis here. But let me come to you in Lagos, Kenny Okolubo. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Is Nigeria fighting criminals, or is it fighting an ecosystem that includes financiers, informants, and political protectors? Because one retired general of those generals who held the news conference suggested people in positions of authority may be facilitating access to ammunition. I mean, how seriously should Nigerians take those kinds of allegations?
Well, the fact that the death of General Rabi Abubakar is a very sad commentary. I mean, after the death of Uba, and, first and foremost, to have been traveling with his wife without security in Katsina was quite unwise. Nobody would have known the circumstances in which he was traveling, but he was a very vocal person when he was a spokesperson of the defense ministry. And incidentally, he also spoke a lot about kidnapping and when children were abducted and the release of those children, that video has been trending. But you see, the most important aspect of it is when you hear that generals are kidnapped and eventually they die, you sort of become frightened, the ordinary civilian. Yes, there was a bit of step up in the fight in Borno, and we saw the release of 350 children. Incidentally, the children in Ibadan are still not released. The teachers are still not released. It's over a month now. And even though you call it soft targets, because the general most likely was not armed and he might have just been targeted. But we cannot continue to play with our intelligence. Our intelligence has not given us the results that we expect that it should give us. Because actionable intelligence should have been able to tell some of these attacks. Yes, a lot of them that are nipped on the bud, to be fair to the security agencies, you will not get to know because they did not come to fruition. But it is quite worrisome, and when the retired generals come together to say, look, we must put an end to it, and you see the protests that are going on, it calls to question that this state police issue should be given an accelerated process, and the issue of forest guards, because we cannot continue to just sympathize with those who have lost their lives when these attacks happen. And we are delaying the process of the implementation of state police and the issue of forest guards. I remember I was speaking with somebody who happens to know what is going on with the civil defense, and they were asking for just 55,000 rifles to arm their personnel. They say they have less than 67,000 rifles. And I was actually, shocked that an arm like the civil defense that has to do with the Safe School program is complaining of the fact that they have the personnel, but they do not have the weapon. And so it calls to question that, does the commander-in-chief, is he aware of all these lacunas and all these lapses? These are the things that we need to, immediately, not even by, just speaking about it, take action on them. And by the time these ones are armed, and we actually implement the forest guards, and the state police, we must be able to put an end to the ugly episode of what we are facing in terms of security.
Okay. Kenny, thank you very much indeed for that. We're still, you can see that Donu's joined us now, although they're still fiddling around with her microphone. I don't know if we can hear you now, Donu, but let me ask you this. Should Nigeria now, because Kenny mentioned this a hot second ago, should Nigeria now seriously embrace state police and community policing, or would that create new dangers?
I have never thought that the actual hierarchy or ownership of the police force really matters. I've always said about this country that what matters is the intent of the people who are implementing laws and policies. I said the same thing when I was a member of the Presidential Oil and Gas Sector Reform Implementation Committee. You can have the best oil and gas laws in the world, but if you're a bunch of corrupt, incompetence and nincompoops, it's not going to make any difference. And that's how I feel about state police, is that state police, federal police, it doesn't matter if bad actors are involved. And that includes governors.
That's a very interesting point. And let's move away from that now, because time is galloping ahead. And unfortunately, we started a bit late. So if everyone could just keep their answers, borrow a leaf from Donu and keep them nice and short. Let me come to you, Dr. Sam Amadi, because we're changing topics now. We're going to that anti-defection oath, the NDC's anti-defection oath, which some see as a bold innovation. I wonder whether you think it's a sign of distrust in the party's own politicians. Can loyalty genuinely be enforced through legal documents? And you're the right person to ask, because you're, of course, a professor of law.
Well, I think apart from the fact that its constitutionality or legality as such, in terms of binding effect, is dubious, and the psychology creates the sense in which the parties pushing this out could be considered as a distrust of politicians, and maybe in a deeper reading, it shows a sense of, kind of schizophrenia, sense not of you look like frightened. Okay, we're putting these guys to the ballot. We don't even trust that they'll be with us. And so we want to force them to take some actions that suggest they'll be with us. By the way, it's notable that APC is not doing this because it's a party in power. It has attraction. There's something for people to come and collect. So they feel, why do I not bother? So the NDC doing this looks like innovation, but in essence, it's really a sign of lack of trust on those who are taking the ticket and a sense of its own weakness. I think rather they should be thinking, if we win the election, the focus should be, let's win the presidency. Once you win the presidency, the people there will stay with you. And so history says that once you lose, people will likely go for where the winner's party. And so for me at this point, it quite doesn't suggest strength, it doesn't suggest coherence, it rather suggests a distrust of their own candidates.
Right.
And I think it's really signals that maybe the party is looking at those candidates, aspirants who are aspiring as persons who are just, free riding on a vehicle
Right.
and not really being attracted by what the party represents. So I think it's not a good optics.
Okay, Baba Yusuf, what is your take on that? Are we witnessing the beginning of a new era of party discipline in Nigeria or not?
Nigerian politicians are very creative, Charles. And much as, it came as a surprise to a lot of people, I reckon already the game players are already thinking of circumventing this provision. As far as I'm concerned, it's dead on arrival. What is going to happen is going to generate a lot of internal friction ab initio. Albeit the critical players will play, will keep a poker face, if you like. And as we go down the line, depending on what pans out, whether or not, the frontline candidates win. And my advice to NDC is, rather than concentrating on doing this secret society-like agreements, you should focus on winning election, gentlemen. That is what keeps you in the game. Interestingly, if you focus on winning the presidency alone, my point is, it's still not going to change the game. Players that are interested in taking a chunk of the National Assembly are the ones that will have stay power in a democratic dispensation. We've seen it play out in the micro level in Kaduna State when Malam Balarabe Musa won the state governorship, but the state assembly was overwhelmingly MPN. He didn't last long. So I think the focus should be, first of all, to win. It appears there is already a mistrust before we even
Right.
go, in unison to win the election. So as far as I'm concerned, that shouldn't be the priority. That shouldn't be the focus for NDC.
Okay, Donu, just let me come to you because this is the way it ought to go. This is the normal sort of pattern because we skipped you because we had to the last time. But what message? I mean, you've got some affiliation, I think, with the NDC, if
Yes.
not directly, at least indirectly. What message does this send to politicians considering joining the NDC ahead of 2027?
Well, I think it's a fantastic idea because I grew up in a country where politicians have some measure of integrity and ideological belief.
That's in the UK, of
Yes.
course. Yeah.
And I'm just shocked by the fact that most Nigerian politicians appear to be chancers, cynical opportunists, just using one vehicle after the other, never quite committing to anything. It's all about, winner takes all. And frankly, anything that pins them down to behaving like normal, decent men in proper countries, I'm all for it.
That's jolly good. Kenny Okolobo in Lagos. I wonder whether you think that this policy could survive a constitutional challenge if tested in court, and if other parties adopt similar policies. I mean, would Nigerian politics become more stable or more restrictive?
I think parties are bounded by their constitution. So I don't see any problems if a party decides to say, look, we don't want you to defect. Because a whole lot of people see that those who are defecting into the NDC now are doing so because they believe that the wave that Peter Obi had in 2023 will see a lot of them get into office. And let's also be realistic. A lot of those who got into office with the Peter Obi wave defected from the Labour Party. even before the crisis, of the Labour Party began. And so maybe they're taking a cue from it. And I also worked very closely with Governor Dixon. I was the publicity secretary of the PDP Campaign Council in 2019 when he was leaving office. And I remember how detailed he was and how he even wanted to have his own party way back then. And I think Governor Dwejiri was quite ungrateful in the way he treated Dixon. That is, in my opinion, having been somebody who worked very closely. So maybe looking at it from that perspective, it might also have, influenced his being the leader of the party, his decision to say, look, I have learned my lessons. Those that were going to help into office should stick with us and not leave us.
Right, okay. Well, thank you, and thanks for keeping that nice and short. I'm actually very keen to get your take on this next topic, but we're going to do the rounds and come back to you, and hopefully we'll still be able to do that shortly. But Dr. Sam Amadi, let's turn to the Natasha suspension document controversy. When Adams Oshimole and Ireti Kingibe raised concerns about a Senate document on which signatures are alleged to have appeared, but without the consent of those named, how damaging is that to the institution of the Senate?
I think very damaging again, but this Senate, nothing damages it because it's already perhaps damaged.
It's water off a duck's
because
back.
Already
They call it
damaged.
Teflon coated.
Yeah, that's it. Teflon.
Exactly, it's already damaged. But look at it. Look, whether it's Natasha, whether it's all this, is the question around the integrity of process of a legislative house is what should be taken seriously. So when you allege that signatures that that created legislative action were forged prima facie, and again, we saw a document that shows that perhaps the senator himself participated in the report, in the hearing. So the question then is, was her signature procured, falsely? Forgery comes in again. Again, you're creating unreliability around parliamentary documents. So yes, the Nigerian parliamentarians have immunity, and part of giving them parliamentary privilege is that they are supposed to be reasonable people, they're supposed to follow their own due process, and they're making laws. So how are we sure that the laws they have made carry that authenticity? If a legal document that they used for make a parliamentary decision is doubtful of its genuineness. So I think that this Senate needs to, maybe the next Senate, I think this is gone perhaps, they need to really start by to recreate the process, the procedure, the institutional integrity of lawmaking, and then perhaps we'll change. But this is really scandalous, it's silly. Again, we should expect clarity. The parliamentary committee will investigate and come out with clear, but nothing they have ever investigated. So the point is there anyhow this Senate can go lower? Is there any possibility of damaging institution that's already damaged in terms of public trust?
Yeah. Good point. And Baba Yusuf, is the Natasha suspension now becoming secondary to questions about Senate procedure?
Well, absolutely. I totally align with the comments of Dr. Amadi. In my opinion, in the history of this country, and I dare say in the history of the West African sub-region, this 10th National Assembly is the worst. Is a worst representation of a parliament, of a country that prides itself as a giant of Africa, adults and leaders that we voted or whatever they got into office, making a jest of that office. Red and green chamber. Charles, this is a country where we passed a legislation, whether we liked it or not, with the speed of light. I'm talking about the tax and fiscal reforms. Right. And we ended up with multiple copies, in public domain. And people that are supposed to protect the sanctity of legislation were deodorizing the issue. And so like Dr. Amadi said, I don't know how lower they can go, but to be honest, to bust your bubbles is still a case study on how low legislations can go. And I think between now and 2027, we should watch out for the next item. Okay. But then it speaks volume with regards to the traction our political evolution is taking.
Right. Donu, does this controversy reinforce public distrust of the National Assembly?
To be honest with you, there's nothing this National Assembly can do that will surprise me. I mean, as Baba said, It's a question of how low can you go. If you know anything about limbo dancing in the Caribbean, it's about
I like that.
seeing how low you can go.
Yes.
And I'm really shocked that Akpabio put up quite a good showing when he was governor of Akwa Ibom. Should allow his legacy and his reputation to be tarnished by the appalling conduct he has presided over, and in fact, in some cases, initiated since he became Senate president. And the one that really gets me is, as you said, the tax law. What about the electoral law,
law.
and all kinds of things?
Right.
Oh, and bringing grown men and women to forge signatures against some little
Well,
girl.
that's an allegation.
You
I mean,
know?
it hasn't been proven yet, and the senator denying it. So let's be careful in calling it forgery.
But what
It's
else?
alleged to be forgery.
Alleged forgery. But let me
Right.
just say, talking about integrity of legislators, going back quickly to something I wanted to say, was that I don't mind people moving parties if they must, hop from party to party. Freedom of association and all that, constitution and all that. But they should be forced. Legislators, governors, any elected official who wants to move to a new party should be forced to go back to voters and say, okay, you may have voted for me as an individual, you may have voted for the party,
Okay.
but they need to get a new mandate.
Right. That's an interesting point, but it takes us away from the thrust of our sort of focus at the moment. And let me come to you, Kenny Okolubu. And as I said, this is particularly relevant because there are reports float. Of course, you worked at the Senate, so you worked in the Senate President's office, and there are reports floating around that you were one of the people who presided over that document on that fateful night. And obviously, it's for you to confirm or debunk that allegation. But whilst you're thinking about that, I mean, how should the Senate respond to these allegations that names appeared on a report without proper endorsement?
Well, I'm surprised, Charles, that the Senate's proceedings were very clear on the day Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan was suspended. Yes, somebody drew my attention to Senator Ireti Kinjigbe's interview, and I heard her very clearly. She said her signature was not forged. She said she didn't see the report. She was in a retreat. She attended the initial committee sitting, and she didn't see the report, meaning she didn't sign the report. But she's not saying her signature was forged. And even Senator Adams Oshomole that made the allegation clearly said that what happened was that most likely the attendance register was attached to that report. But the summary of it all is that the Senate took a decision, it was debated. The Ethics and Committee has more than 20 members. So if there were like 2-3 dissenting opinions, it doesn't mean that the report did not, pass the scrutiny of the entire Senate, which decided to take their decision. And don't forget that Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan went to court, and the appeal court eventually held that the Senate was right in carrying out the disciplinary measures, and that also the contempt that she was held by, since she was not given Form 48 and 49, they also dismissed the contempt that she was held on by Justice Yusuf. You see, why this judgment was important was that, if you remember Senator Omo Agege, when he went to court, Justice Dingba clearly said that Senator Omo Agege's rights was impugned on, and ruled in favor of Senator Ovioma Agege, who was just an ordinary senator as at that time. And the Senate did not test their powers. They didn't appeal that decision. And Senator Natasha Akpoti has not appealed to the Supreme Court, so we shouldn't cry more than the bereaved. I think the fact that these things were done in the open, the plenary was held, should suffice to whatever report that was given. Okay. And the chairman of the Senate Committee on Ethics, Neda Imaswe, has not even responded to this. Right. People have actually moved on with this issue of Senator Natasha.
Well, clearly they haven't.
And the Senate. I think we should move on to into very more important issues.
Right. Clearly they haven't moved on, because if they had, the issue wouldn't be coming up again. But in any case, for this particular program, we're moving on. You're watching Arise Prime Time. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our look back at the week that was. Stay with us. Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now let's continue our assessment of the week that was, a week that has tested institutions, sharpened political divides, and raised serious questions about the direction of governance in Nigeria. So are Nigeria's institutions proving their resilience under pressure, or revealing their vulnerabilities? Well, let's continue to unpack the week that was. And still with me are our guest commentators, the director of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Dr. Sam Amadi, who's also a professor of law, the international multimedia journalist and former BBC correspondent, Donu Kabara, and the policy strategist and group CEO of the global investment and trade company, Baba Yusuf. All three are with me here in the studio. And from our studios in Lagos, I'm also joined by the public policy analyst and political communications strategist, Kenny Okolube. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for staying with us. Let me come to you, Dr. Sam Amadi. And let's turn to the Diezani Alison Madueke verdict. What is the biggest lesson Nigerians should take from this non-guilty verdict?
I think two. First, that we've had several incidents of press trial, or media trial, people say, and public conviction before the court of law. I mean, corruption is both a crisis in this country as well as a political talking point, political strategy document. So oftentimes, when we frame people as corrupt or criminal, it becomes, it actually has political undertone and also political strategy objective. So the first lesson is that maybe not all that looks dark is really dark. The second would be that now we cannot say that, look, the Nigerian anti-corruption institution, do they really have a real case? Do they really try to create or build cases against those that are, because EFCC was actually almost like branded her criminal, was conclusive. Now, the British trial system is one that is not as bad as, I don't want to say perfect, but at least not a bad system. So you've gone through the normal court system in the UK and you've been go to trial and declared not convicted. It's a stamp of clearance. It means that she's free as somebody who looks at evidence. And what evidence is a proof of fact. So the fact today is that those charges are not true. Now, she's probably going to come back to Nigeria sooner than later. And the question is she going to get some sense of public restoration? Is there going to be also a sense of state kind of
that's a good point.
explanation to say, okay, well, we probably blackmailed this woman. The evidence has proved that. Or would there be new trials based on maybe what would have, again, a conviction, a discharge in the UK court does not really mean that it cannot be proceeded against for other things. But in the public domain, she's free today. She has been cleared. So the question is, what next? And I think what next is that she'll probably come back and run for office in any of the parties.
Right. So let me ask you, I like that. Well, that would sound like Nigeria.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let me ask you this, Baba Yusuf, just on the back of what Dr. Sam Amadi was saying there, how should anti-corruption agencies respond to such a high-profile setback, basically, because they were marshalling a case against her? I mean, is this a legal victory for Mrs. Diezani or an indictment of the way corruption cases are pursued in this country?
It's both. First of all, she won a victory in the courts in the United Kingdom, which will rub off whether we like it or not on her case in Nigeria. I heard other legal luminaries saying they are not connected, but I dare say they are, because some of the evidence and exhibit and even witness statements are shared in this case, whatever you want to call the case, bribery and corruption, money laundering, whatever. The bottom line is this, Charles. We have made a mockery of our security enforcement and prosecutorial agencies. They have more or less become, they have dramatized their function rather than institutionalize the process. Earlier on, Dr. Amadi talked about integrity of the process. This is very crucial, in any well-meaning, progressive society, whether it is in law enforcement, whether it's a judicial process or political process. As it is, we have seen many, many times, and where he landed as well, where people's matters were celebrated in the public domain, and they end up getting appointments,
Right.
in government. So it is a setback for the Nigerian prosecutorial agencies, and actually a slap on their face, that they should do their homework and focus on having watertight cases. We heard in this country where the current EFCC chairman, at the beginning of his administration, was so bold to say he will resign if a particular, politically exposed figure was not prosecuted the way and manner he should. At the end of the day, we see people getting candidate tickets to run for offices. Almost majority of the people running the top tier offices in this country have EFCC cases. Some of them are halfway through prosecutions, and they are holding high-level office, number 2, number 3, number 4. Your guess is as good as mine. So the public confidence has eroded to the extent that people are now deciding to decide for themselves whether somebody is guilty or not. Unfortunately, the system will not prosecute these people. They will end up leading us from the top level to the low. And that is the tragedy of our polity.
And Donu, does this case tell us something deeper about the difference between suspicion and proof?
I suppose it does. But I, have been quite surprised.
I mean, you've known, you know Diazani
Yes.
reasonably well.
Since we were children.
Right.
Yes, we're from the same place, more or less. And I've been surprised by the number of oil industry insiders here who have expressed profound skepticism about the British verdict. A lot of people here think she was actually guilty and are at a loss to understand why the British could not come up with better evidence.
Yeah, but what is your
I would
assessment?
know. My own view is that,
Right.
look, it took a long time to come to court. It came across to me as something of a show trial. It could be that the British actually couldn't find any evidence against Dizani, but prosecuted her to please the Nigerian government, because the British government has displayed a lot of very sycophantic behavior towards the Nigerian government in recent years.
Times.
You know what I mean? Maybe they did it just to say, okay, a few people insist, we'll put her on trial. But I think it does say something about the difference between proof, evidence, and reality, and allegations. And let me just say something. I want a special slap on the face of Abdul Rashid Bawa, the
That was the
EFCC
former
chairman. Yes.
chairman of the EFCC.
I remember him arriving in the National Assembly with obscene items like jeweled underwear. There was actually a bra, do you remember?
Right.
Made from diamonds and blah, blah. And I remember thinking, this is so fake. That's not even Dizani's size. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of rubbish going on. They really wanted to tarnish her reputation.
right.
But most important of all, in my view, is what you've said, my dear. Being that there are so many criminals at large in this country, holding high office, thoroughly enjoying themselves, who have done worse than whatever Dizani has been accused of. And I don't see why she should go to jail while they are free.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
And Kenny
totally agree
Okolubo,
with
I'm
you.
going to come to you and kindly keep this reasonably brief because we're fast running out of time. Could this verdict influence future corruption investigations involving politically exposed persons? I'm wondering how Nigerians should balance respect for judicial outcomes with legitimate public concerns about accountability.
The fact is that the case that Dizani was tried was 6 counts. If you remember, Magu asked for her extradition to Nigeria to be tried. I'm aware that when Magu was asking for extradition, there were a lot of counts. A lot of properties have been forfeited by Dizani. Even her associates like Aluko. The Galactica was sold and the money was returned to Nigeria. Nigeria has spent that money. So what am I trying to say? It is too early in the day to say it is Uhuru. Yes, I'm happy for her. She's been freed by the London court. But the EFCC has not said she's free. She hasn't come to Nigeria. 6 counts is not... Sometimes you see 20 counts, you see 25 counts. If she's been freed from 6 counts in the United Kingdom, that's not going to be an indictment on a corruption agency. And Yahya Bello, for example, who was inferred to... it's being tried by Justice Aneni is being tried by Justice Emeka Nwite. In fact, he happens to be the only one that is facing corruption charges in 2 courts. I don't think there's any magic the EFCC will do again. That is why I've always called for a special court. If you remember, Charles, on this your program, I started the call for a special court to try corruption cases. And so if the courts are slow, do you blame it on the EFCC? I must say that this EFCC has been one that has achieved a whole lot more than any of the other EFCC chairmen that have been on board. And so let's not just make sweeping statements because of the trial of Desiani. Desiani should come to Nigeria to clear herself. If she's very sure that the 6 counts that cleared her in the UK, she can be cleared of it in Nigeria.
Okay. Well, thank you for that and for keeping it pithy. Let me come to you, Dr. Sam Amadi, about a very interesting development in Nigeria this week. We saw Nyesom Wike, the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, gifting houses to judges. Is this a commendable welfare intervention or a constitutional red flag?
I think it's actually a violation of the Constitution. First, by the way, there are 3 issues here. I like the word used, gifting. The 3 concepts are important for constitutional democracy. The first is supremacy of the judiciary, which is that the judiciary ultimately determines what's right and wrong. All our rights are predicated on what the court of finally determine. The second is the idea of independence, which has a structural aspect. And that's why today the separation of power, it can be both personnel in the executive and in the judiciary. So structural independence. The third one is impartiality, which goes to behavioral. Judges are supposed to behave a particular way. Now, if you look at independence, the Constitution provides for first-line charge, and the logic is that the budgeting shouldn't determine how the judges perform. So in other bureaucracies of government, budgets can be released when they like. They can use the budget tool to control. But the judges are appointed with a tenure. They have their first-line charge. They're insulated, structurally removed from control by the executive. Now, the judges are not a class of mendicants or some kind of displaced persons or some kind of vulnerable community that is okay. Government said, look, we have these guys living under the bridge. We need to provide them immediate housing to sustain them. So the logic then is therefore, what is this logic? Now, if they needed to have housing, they have budget. The Chief Justice of the Federation or the President of the Court of Appeal can put in the budget and they supervise the construction. Even parastatals in Nigeria build their own house. So this is clearly a bribe. And finally, timing. So 3 things: structural, it violates constitutional due process. It's the use of gifts to control. So it's state capture. And the point that why do you do this in a year to election? You give them a house. So I'm embarrassed that the President of the Court of Appeal could actually accept this. This is really nowhere in the world. I just conclude.
Okay, we must move on.
Okay, so it doesn't happen anywhere.
We really have to.
It doesn't happen.
On.
Even a politician moving together with.
Let me come to you, Baba Yusuf. Should judges accept such gifts from an executive office holder? I mean, does perception matter as much as legality when it comes to the judiciary? Very briefly, 30 seconds.
Charles. Optics is very key, especially in the case of the judiciary, because perception could be termed as reality in the case of the justices, the kind of judicial pronouncements they will make vis-a-vis what has come to them. I totally agree. I'm a proponent of, totally insulating the judiciary from the executive so that they can be trusted by the people, because justice should be seen to be served. Justice should be felt to be served when the president of the Court of Appeal or the chief of the High Court are making such statement at the opening of the residences, basically almost kowtowing to executives, leave a very bad taste in the mouth. And I feel sorry for Nigeria if this continues.
Donu, what does this controversy reveal about the relationship between the executive and the judiciary in Nigeria? Briefly.
There must be something wrong with me, because I don't think those houses are so super amazing. And I don't see why judges shouldn't be given nice accommodation. I think all public servants and Nigerians should get nice houses. My view is that if just because Wike or Tinubu use our money, judges' money, to build nice houses for judges doesn't mean that they have to be influenced. If I was a judge, I will accept the house.
But the judges can bid for themselves.
Yeah, okay.
What I'm saying, if I'm a judge, I will accept the house,
Why
and
should
I
we
will
bid for
still
them?
condemn them if they
That's the
break
same thing
the
they
law.
talk about people giving voters inducements.
Inducement,
Yeah.
they can still vote.
Okay, let me come to you, Kenny, very briefly. What are your thoughts on this before we have to go?
I was actually speaking to a friend of mine who is a judge. He said, how can you write judgments in that beautiful house and think that you will not be influenced? He was joking anyway when he told me that. The houses are good, but I think the optics is what people are talking about at this point in time. And we must be realistic, even though we don't think it should influence judgments, but the optics at this time might not have sent the right message.
Very good. And on that note, I want to say thank you very much indeed to all my guests, the director of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Dr. Sam Ahmadi, the international multimedia journalist, former BBC correspondent, Donu Kabara, the policy strategist and group CEO of the global investment and trade company Baba Yusuf, and of course from our studios in Lagos, the public policy analyst and political communication strategist, Kenny Okolubo. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of Arise Primetime. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos, bye-bye and thank you for watching.